Apple went to China in the late 1990s. It moved its production facilities out of California, moved everything to China. At the time, Chinese labor was very cheap. The Chinese government was offering free land, no taxes for 25 years, utilities at half cost. It looked like a beautiful package for Apple. And Tim Cook, who had worked for Dell before working for Apple, had taken Dell to China. He went to Steve Jobs and he said, we should go to China. And Steve agreed, and so Apple went to China. But now what has happened is that virtually everything Apple makes is made in China. So if there's a lockdown, and there is right now, Apple's facilities are in Chengdu. There's a lockdown in Chengdu right now. So the new Apple phone, I forgot the number, but whatever it is, you're not going to see it very soon because they can't get it. And on top of that, increasingly you're seeing Chinese companies copying Apple technology and eating Apple's share in the Chinese market. So even Apple, married as it is to China, has begun to experiment with moving some production to India and to Vietnam. But there's another element to this that I think people need to be aware of, and that is that we Americans think of Apple as an American company. And it is technically an American company, chartered as a corporation in the United States, I think in the state of Delaware. But in fact, because everything it makes is in China, and because whereas in America we have a rule of law, so the U.S. government can't compel Apple to do a lot of things, even if it wants to. That's not true in China. China can compel Apple to do whatever it damn well pleases. And so Apple has, in a way, been captured politically by China. So when Apple testifies before the Congress or lobbies U.S. government entities, it presents itself as an American company, but officials have to keep in mind that it is, in a way, more subservient to Beijing than it is to in Washington. Apple has instant entree. It has armies of lawyers and lobbyists. It's powerful. In Beijing, it's on its knees. And it's important. And it's not just Apple. Many major American companies are highly reliant on production in China, and all of them are subject to coercion by the Chinese Communist Party. That's a very important reason why we need to reshore or friendshore, make our companies much less dependent on China.
You are an advocate of establishing industrial policy in America. Okay?
Well, we're doing it. It's happening. Congress just passed the CHIPS Act. Both parties voted for it to assure that we have not necessarily have an industry, but that we have the leading semiconductor industry. And the same kind of attitude is being taken toward other technologies, towards telecommunications. I mean, the U.S. government single-handedly has deeply wounded Huawei, the major Chinese telecom company. So we, de facto, are practicing industrial policy. Secretary Raimondo at the Commerce Department has set up a team of people to evaluate industries and identify those that are most important, that we need to have substantial production in the U.S. and how we need to do that. And so I have to say I'm a happy warrior. I have been personally arguing for and fighting for an American industrial policy for more than 40 years. And hey, finally it's happening. I'm a happy guy.
Well, so maybe for the benefit of our audience, what does that mean? What does it mean?
So what that means is that the government plays a role in helping to finance or to entice investment and research and development in particular industries. Typically, the industries that you're talking about are advanced technology industries or industries that contribute. So, for example, on the one hand, you don't think of General Motors in the same terms that you think of Intel. Intel is clearly a high-tech company. General Motors, you don't put them in the same category of technology. However, General Motors buys a lot from Intel. So if you want Intel to be strong, you also want GM to be strong. And so industrial policy would aim at being sure that Intel's healthy and being sure that GM is in a position to keep buying a lot of Intel chips. Or if it's not GM, then somebody else has to be a buyer out there.
Well, and the context of this is that, you know, when you have these giant companies like Huawei as an example, right? These are not, you know, independent multinationals working with profit as their primary motive, even though it is a motive. They're actually working at the behest of the Chinese regime. So you have these giant, I mean, that it's like kind of the epitome, or what do you would still call it industrial policy, but it's sort of these companies are deeply intertwined with the national security.
Well, an argument against what the Biden administration is doing is it's industrial policy, it's interfering in free markets, we don't want that. Well, the irony is that these companies, as we said, they're active in China. So if they're not subject to a U.S. industrial policy, they'll be wholly subject to a Chinese industrial policy. So you can't escape industrial policy. So if China's going to have one, we need to have one to offset, if nothing else, to offset the Chinese policy.
That's a very interesting way to put it, because of course they are leveraging what they have on these companies maximally, constantly, because that's just how the CCP operates, right? They see it as their role to do that almost, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, also you have the aspect that U.S. venture capital has been very active in China. Well, if the Chinese are trying to propagate particular industries or technology, they will welcome, they will attempt to entice U.S. venture capital to invest in those technologies in China. That's not good for the U.S. We want that invested in U.S. technology. So I think you cannot escape an industrial policy.